There is an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that most Americans have never heard of, and it is the single most important piece of military real estate the United States controls anywhere on Earth. Its name is Diego Garcia. It sits precisely 1,000 miles south of India, 1,000 miles east of the African coastline, and at the geographic center of a region through which 20% of all global maritime trade moves every single year. Without Diego Garcia, the United States cannot project military power into the Persian Gulf, East Africa, or South Asia with anything close to its current speed or capability. And right now, in the middle of an active war with Iran and a deepening military standoff with China, the legal ownership of that island is being challenged in ways that Washington has quietly classified as one of its most dangerous strategic vulnerabilities in a generation. This is the story of the base nobody in Washington wants to discuss publicly, and why losing it would reshape the global balance of power faster than any war the United States has ever fought. To understand why Diego Garcia matters so completely, you need to understand what the Indian Ocean actually is as a geographic space. It is the third largest ocean on Earth, stretching from the southern tip of Africa to the western coast of Australia, and from the Antarctic waters in the south to the Indian subcontinent in the north. Every oil tanker leaving the Persian Gulf for Europe or Asia crosses this water. Every container ship moving manufactured goods from Chinese factories to African and European ports transits through these lanes. Every American submarine that operates anywhere in the Eastern Hemisphere has to navigate through this ocean at some point in its deployment cycle. There is no comparable geographic choke point on land that concentrates this much of the world's commerce and military movement into a single space. The Indian Ocean is the circulatory system of the global economy, and Diego Garcia sits at its exact anatomical center. The island itself would not impress a casual observer. It is a horseshoe-shaped coral atoll, 37 miles of coastline, covered in coconut palms and scrub vegetation, sitting barely 6 feet above sea level. Before the Americans arrived, roughly 2,000 people called the Chagos Islands home. They were the Chagosians, fishermen and farmers who had built a complete society across the archipelago over generations. Between 1968 and 1973, the British government, acting at the direct request of the United States, forcibly removed every single one of them from the islands. They were loaded onto cargo ships and transported to Mauritius in the Seychelles, where they were left with almost no financial support and no resettlement plan. Their dogs were killed in the cargo holds of ships. Their homes were demolished by British engineering crews. Their archipelago was handed to the United States under a secret lease agreement signed in 1966, and the construction of one of the most powerful military installations in the history of warfare began on the cleared ground almost immediately. What the United States built on Diego Garcia over the following 2 decades is, by any measure, extraordinary. The base, officially designated Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia, contains a deep-water port capable of simultaneously berthing aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and the massive pre-positioning ships that carry a full armored brigade's worth of vehicles and equipment. It has a runway 12,000 feet long, reinforced to support the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the aircraft that carries America's nuclear arsenal, and that has flown combat missions in every major American campaign since the 1990s. The base holds pre-positioned military stocks sufficient to sustain a large ground force for months without any resupply from the continental United States. It operates one of the most sensitive space-tracking radar installations in the entire American military network. Every significant American military operation in the Middle East and Central Asia over the past 4 decades has depended on Diego Garcia. B-52 heavy bombers flew combat sorties directly from Diego Garcia during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. The same aircraft launched sustained strikes from the island's runway in the opening weeks of the Afghanistan campaign in October 2001. Diego Garcia served as a critical logistics and strike hub during the initial phase of the Iraq War in 2003. And right now, as the United States Navy maintains its active blockade of Iranian oil exports and keeps 2 carrier strike groups deployed in the Persian Gulf, the logistics chain that keeps those ships fueled and armed runs in substantial part through Diego Garcia. Without it, American military power across the entire Middle East and Indian Ocean theater would not simply be reduced, it would be structurally broken in ways that no budget increase could repair in less than years. Here is where the crisis that almost no one is talking about actually begins. In 2019, the International Court of Justice issued a formal advisory opinion finding that the United Kingdom's continued administration of the Chagos Islands was a violation of international law. The ruling determined that Britain had illegally separated the islands from Mauritius in 1965, 3 years before Mauritian independence, and that this separation had never been legally valid. The United Nations General Assembly followed by passing a resolution formally calling on the United Kingdom to withdraw its administration within 6 months. Britain refused to comply. But the diplomatic cost of maintaining that position grew measurably more serious with every passing year. In October 2024, the British government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer reached a preliminary agreement with Mauritius to transfer full sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. Under the terms announced, Mauritius would take legal ownership of all the islands, including Diego Garcia itself, and the United Kingdom would lease back the atoll for 99 years, with the United States continuing to operate its base under the existing sublease arrangement. The British government presented the deal as a morally necessary resolution of a colonial injustice. The reaction in Washington was considerably different from approval. Senior Pentagon officials and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee began immediately raising the question that the British negotiators had apparently not fully answered before signing. The question was simple and had no comfortable answer. What happens to the American military base at Diego Garcia if Mauritius, at any point during those 99 years, decides it no longer wishes to honor the arrangement on current terms? Mauritius is a functioning parliamentary democracy with regular competitive elections. The government that signed the preliminary deal in 2024 is not the government that will be making decisions in 2045 or 2065 or 2095. And Mauritius has a relationship with China that American strategic planners find deeply concerning and that has been deepening systematically for more than a decade. China is by far the largest external investor in Mauritius. Chinese state enterprises have financed and built major infrastructure across the island, including port upgrades, government buildings, and road networks. Chinese diplomatic influence at the senior levels of Mauritian politics is significant, active, and backed by genuine financial leverage. The Chinese ambassador in Port Louis is not a ceremonial posting. If a future Mauritian government with closer ties to Beijing chose to renegotiate the Diego Garcia lease on terms the United States found unacceptable, or simply declined to extend it, The strategic consequence for American power in the Indian Ocean would be unlike anything the United States military has faced in the modern era. Because there is no replacement for Diego Garcia anywhere in the Indian Ocean. American defense planners have studied this question with great seriousness on multiple occasions, and the conclusion has been identical every time. The existing American bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Djibouti, and Singapore are either too geographically constrained, too politically exposed, or simply too far from the center of the Indian Ocean to perform the same functions. A B-2 stealth bomber already positioned at Diego Garcia, 1,000 miles from the Persian Gulf, represents a fundamentally different military capability than a B-2 that must fly 14 hours from Missouri with multiple aerial refueling contacts. The difference in response time and deterrent effect on an adversary is not a matter of degree. It is a different kind of military power entirely. China has understood this with complete strategic clarity for at least 2 decades. Beijing has spent those years methodically building the string of pearls, a network of ports, diplomatic agreements, and dual-use infrastructure stretching from the South China Sea through the Indian Ocean to the eastern coast of Africa. Every node in that network serves a single purpose: to reduce American operational freedom in the Indian Ocean without ever requiring China to fire a weapon. Djibouti, where China now operates its first overseas military base, commands the entrance to the southern Red Sea. Gwadar in Pakistan gives China warm water access to the Arabian Sea. Hambantota in Sri Lanka was transferred to effective Chinese control on a 99-year lease after Sri Lanka could not service its Chinese debt. And Mauritius, the small democracy that now holds sovereign ownership of Diego Garcia, sits at the center of Beijing's Indian Ocean map. When Donald Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, his administration moved quickly to challenge the Starmer-Mauritius agreement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio formally stated that the deal was unacceptable and represented a direct threat to American national security. Trump described the arrangement as a terrible deal for the United States and called on Britain to renegotiate. The British government found itself having to reopen terms it had publicly presented as final. The Mauritian government expressed frustration and accused Washington of undermining a legitimate legal resolution. The Chagosians, watching their hopes once again become entangled in the calculations of great powers, continued waiting, as they have waited for more than 50 years. The paradox at the heart of American strategic power is now fully visible to anyone willing to examine it honestly. The United States has spent more than $2 trillion building the most technologically advanced military force in human history. Every carrier strike group, every nuclear submarine, every stealth bomber in that force was deployed with one unstated foundational assumption: that Diego Garcia would always be available and always be American. The moment that assumption becomes uncertain, the entire strategic architecture built upon it becomes uncertain as well. The base is still open. The runway is still in use. The submarines are still docked. But in the planning rooms of the Pentagon, analysts working through scenarios that senior officials do not want in press briefings keep returning to the same question: what is the plan if Diego Garcia is no longer ours?